So I'd like to welcome you to the first Ranieri Agency podcast, and could be the last depending on how today goes. We thought this would be a great time to start up, as obviously there is a lot of uncertainty out there at the moment with COVID-19, and we thought we'd run a series of these addressing concerns and theories we've been hearing in the CE and gaming industry. The first concern I wanted to address is just what's going on in the CE industry at the moment from a sales point of view. We've heard a lot of people talking about the fact that Amazon is not stocking CE product anymore. What's the impact of that on our partners and colleagues, brands that we work for, and just sort of try to get to the bottom of what the truth of this really is. So I wanted to bring some people into these podcasts that I know have an enormous amount of experience in the industry. And I'm very pleased today to welcome Warren Hudson, who is a very good pal of mine from the industry, but also currently the VP of International Sales at Sphero, and also the founder of an agency called Unlock EMEA, which is an organization which helps bring brands to market in Europe and the Asian Pacific. So Warren, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciated. It's unfortunate we're not doing this in person over a beer, but hey.
You heard my question earlier. What we really want to sort of gather from you today is just kind of really, at the moment, what's going on with brands and what are their biggest concerns right now? And you may even want to tell us which brands you're sort of representing as well at the moment.
So I'm primarily focused on a brand called Sphero, who make app-connected robots that are tons of fun, but give kids an introduction to coding and programming. We became pretty well known for a license deal that we did with Disney and a product called BB-8 that we produced. So that was our golden bullet. But we also have a fantastic educational business. We're in 40,000 schools globally and all that kind of good stuff. Separate to that, I am the founder of Unlock EMEA, which works with a number of carefully selected brands to help them grow in Europe, the Middle East, and more recently Asia, where we've opened an office as well. So I think you'd asked about the concerns of brands there, Pietro, in the first part. So it's tough. It's unprecedented. These are uncharted waters. Obviously, we have a virus that's spreading at a pretty fast rate. And before I get into the impact on the market and retail and consumer electronics, I'd like to say, to all of our partners and friends, to anyone that's had a brush with coronavirus, I wish you a full and fast recovery. To anyone that hasn't, let's hope it stays that way. And I wish you all well. So anyway, back to the business side of things. The concerns from brands are, just what is happening out there, right? We've got shops that are closing. We've got consumers who are staying at home. We've got a reduced level of consumer confidence. We've got additional demand for the essential products. So, toilet rolls, hand sanitizers, food, especially that has long life. That's all in high demand. But we're definitely seeing that the luxury items, the stuff that people don't need, is impacted with reduced demand. And I think that's a consequence of consumer confidence dropping. People are concerned whether they're going to have a job to go to, especially and immediately those that work within hospitality sectors, restaurants, bars, hotels, all that kind of stuff. I think the implication for brands could be significant. I think all of those brands right now who have been working with product forecasts for some time and will have been predicting revenue flowing into the business will have seen disruption there. And I think they're very quickly having to work out what that disruption looks like, what will revenue look like in the coming weeks and months, and how can they better predict their cash flow and what's going to happen with inventory, because we're definitely going to see some overstock positions. And I think it all boils down to, how long is this going to last for, and how do I get through this? If you look at where we were before the virus, it was a pretty good outlook, and the indicators for the long term were quite positive. And fundamentally, nothing has changed. It's not like the 2008 situation where you've got a broken banking system. You know, businesses haven't become bad businesses overnight. Brands don't have bad products overnight.
Yeah,
And
and
I think
this is where I was. I just can't make my mind up on this. So you're right. In 2008, there was a big, recession, and obviously I was, you and I were both in consumer electronics at the time, and at the time we shared some clients as well. But one thing that across the board, obviously sales were down, and big items purchased like houses and cars and all that kind of stuff. But the consumer electronics industry still seemed to do, considering, reasonably okay, because I think people were at home and they weren't buying the big things, so they were still buying like the cases and the headphones and the kind of smaller items, which kind of made them feel good day to day. And I did wonder, within this sort of current situation, it's not like we're hit by a recession, well, yet, but with people being at home, will that draw their attention to more online purchasing? And maybe sales could actually come, can certainly in consumer electronics and gaming do end up doing well out of this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we were already seeing some trends from bricks and mortar towards online. We've been seeing that for years now, right? And Amazon's been a key player. I think in recent weeks that has accelerated, and I think that that transition and that demand online will continue to grow. The question is, can the online infrastructures support the level of demand that we're going through them? And that's the big unknown at the moment. But I think fundamentally in 2008 we had a broken banking system. Now we've got a downturn as a fear of the unknown rather than a fundamentally broken foundation. And I expect, and I've been reading a bit about this and talking to lots of partners, but I'm expecting some sort of V shape here where the recovery could happen as quickly as the downturn. I don't know whether we've got to the bottom of the downturn or whether it's an immediate spike back up, but I don't think it's a long downturn. And then I do think it's a big increase back up. So I think as long as brands can get through this period, the opportunity on the other side will be absolutely fantastic. So, I just wish everyone good health and to fight through.
Yeah. So you mentioned about the infrastructure not being able to cope potentially with kind of all the online sales, and it kind of led me to one of my questions that, a theory that I've been hearing that Amazon aren't stocking and they're prioritizing the kind of COVID related purchases like hand sanitizer, tissue. I mean, I think my German colleague said that some pasta was online on Amazon for 36 euros for a 500 gram bag, which he found staggering. So, I mean, is that true? Are we going to see a downturn on Amazon in consumer electronics products because Amazon themselves are prioritizing COVID related purchases, or is that sort of...
So it's a good question, and we're living sort of day by day with new information at the moment. As most people know, there are two ways to sell with Amazon. You can either sell to Amazon as a retailer through Vendor Central, or you can sell through Amazon as a platform via Seller Central. And there are advantages to disadvantages of both. You've heard correct that Amazon as a retailer through their Vendor Central platform are prioritizing the urgent items and have communicated that they'll be reducing or stopping intake of consumer electronics products as an example. So that's concerning. Any brand that has a strategy to sell to Amazon as a retailer and does not have a Seller Central third-party platform strategy needs to address that immediately, because they could continue servicing demand while managing the whole end-to-end experience and the customer through Seller Central. They can then use Amazon's logistics network, which is FBA, or they can fulfill via their own or any third-party delivery network as well. So there's ways to continue. And I would urge anyone that hasn't got a seller central strategy in place right now to think about that quite seriously at the moment, because we don't know for how long Amazon are going to have this view that they're not going to bring in non-essential items.
Yeah, and I'm guessing, whilst we're in the sort of, the grips of COVID-19, and we're still, countries are still shutting down. I mean, I know the UK is obviously getting ready for the worst at the moment. Certainly over the last few days, it's progressively becoming more, more locked down. People are going to be kind of bulk buying this stuff. But I guess as soon as, the grip starts to get released on these different countries, Amazon should start to release more shelf space again, and hopefully everything starts to get back to normal quicker.
I couldn't agree more. I think it comes back to that idea that we could be experiencing a bit of a V shape here. It's a really sudden, significant, huge downturn. But as you look at countries like China, who've taken some immediate action. Yesterday was the first day that they did not have a single case diagnosed. They've locked down. It's been painful for a short period, but I would anticipate now that things could get back on track quickly. There are already, there's a lot of good news coming through with regard to a vaccine, and I think we're on this planet for quite a while, and we'll look back at this period as a short and uncomfortable period, but we just have to think about when it's going to change, and we need to be prepared to capitalize when things start to upturn, and I do think it will be significant as well.
Yeah. So talking about brands planning for COVID and kind of the effects that could happen to them through the year, is there anything that you think that brands should be thinking about? They may have a lot of product out in retail at the moment. They may have, they may be stocking lots of things somewhere. Is there something that they can be doing, or planning ahead for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it links back. Most brands are going to be concerned with their cash position and their cash flow, which will have been based on forecasted demand, and that demand may have just dropped off. So I think there's a lot of brands out there that are going to be experiencing overstock issues. There may be retailers that have returned products to distributors. There may be some difficult discussions going on between retailers or distributors with brands about payments as a consequence of this. So I think brands, very quickly need to get their head around, if they have a stock problem, face up to it, deal with it really quickly. The answer is probably to not take stock from Europe and ship it back to the Far East and then try and solve the problem. It's solving the problem here within the market, and there will still be opportunities. There's still people that you can speak to about taking positions on stock, and they'll take a long-term view on this. So there are ways where you can turn inventory into cash relatively quickly, and I think that's going to be really, really important. And then I think this is probably a period, Pietro, where brands should take a little bit of time to reflect. I mean, being a successful brand, I liken it often to cooking a very complicated, nice meal in a restaurant. There are lots and lots of ingredients, and if you miss an ingredient and it's not a key one, then you probably still have a meal, but it may not taste the same. If you miss 2 or 3 ingredients or a key ingredient, you may not have a meal. So I think now's a good time to just reflect on everything. When we're sort of chatting to brands, we're thinking about not just product, but packaging, compliance, certifications, their logistics strategy, their roadmap, their retail execution. We're talking about price lists because there's been a bunch of currency fluctuations lately, and VAT and recommended retail prices. So there's all these things to consider. And then, of course, the one key area where you and your business are involved is around marketing. And I think it's critical, especially if you've got a great product, that you have a plan to not only put it out there, but tell consumers that it exists, your brand, your product, and make sure that there's pull through from the channel.
Yeah, 100% agree. And funnily enough, I've been writing a LinkedIn post about this, but I do believe that that there are going to be some brands out there where there are going to be some very quick wins available. I mean, the people that that have a good marketing function in place and can switch their sort of digital comm strategy on quickly, they could really profit out of this situation. People aren't going to face-to-face bricks and mortar type, shopping malls, events, festivals. They're just not happening at the moment. And, if you can switch your spend to digital, you can make some very quick wins, because I guarantee that a lot of brands are going to be doing it. But again, like you're saying with your restaurant analogy, it's trying to find the right mix of digital marketing to meet the situation, because there is a lot of, brands will be trying lots of different things. They can very quickly spend a lot of money in paid, for example, on social, but if you haven't got the kind of e-commerce strategy in place, you need to push it somewhere. So, and that again sort of lends itself to what you guys do as well, where, optimizing Amazon pages, making sure that, when traffic is pushed to, your online shop, people convert that sale. So
yeah, and I would add to that, very, very broadly speaking, we're seeing like two types of approaches at the moment. I think the first is, hey, this is really bad. Let's pull back on everything until we understand what it looks like. And then the other side is the brands that are looking at it saying, okay, this is a downturn. There's already some evidence that suggests that it might not be for a long period. And there's a lot of analysts that are predicting it could bounce back very quickly when things start to turn back up. And so I think the brands that fall into the latter category, they're staying involved. They're having conversations with buyers, and these buyers, they're not ready to write off the year as you would expect. They know that there's going to be, a couple of 3 months worth of pain, perhaps longer, but we still have the second half of the year to come. Q3 and Q4 is when a majority of the business is done. We can still plan for that. We can still, anticipate an upturn and be prepared for when everything starts to happen. And I think you have to be around the table now to have those conversations, obviously around the virtual table and not around the real table.
Between you and I, and not people listening to this podcast, have you seen, from a sales point of view, and you don't obviously have to mention brands, but have you seen any significant drops, rises? I mean, anything kind of note? I mean, I would expect. I mean, I suppose we would all expect to see a drop in sales at the moment, but is that what you've been experiencing, online, or is it just kind of business as usual? Or
I mean, online, we're probably seeing demand increase, and we're seeing brands that have to change their tactics in order to capitalize on the current moment. So I think that's really important. Demand is dropping off in retail. Retail stores are closing. We have seen distributors anticipate a period in China where supply might be reduced. So they've taken relatively good stock positions, certainly on key lines and key products. So I don't think it's bitten properly yet, but it may well do in the coming weeks. I have a friend that works in the laptop and sector, and he was saying that he had on one day last week he sold more laptops than he'd sold in Q1, in January and February altogether. Sorry,
home workers.
Exactly. So I think there are certain segments that will perform very well. Obviously, you've got a whole bunch of parents out there that just became teachers at home for a period when their kids are going to be off school. So, if they can find tech that's going to keep their kids, entertained, engaged, give them fun, and even tech that's going to give them some valuable learning skills on top of that as well. If they can learn a new skill while they're off school, then what a great challenge that is. So, I think a brand like Sphero is really well positioned to give parents a bit of peace and quiet in an otherwise hectic household.
Yeah, no, I'm fully experiencing that at the moment. We've got 2 young children here, and it's our first day with us all together in one house, and it's been interesting. I'm surprised no one's burst through the door yet.
We need to make sure we get some Sphero into your hands so you can teach them how to code.
Yeah, well, I'd appreciate that. So, for brands moving forward, I mean, is there any tips you'd give them to kind of, well, prepare for this current period, prepare for, I mean, the upturn as well. I mean, eventually things are going to, pop back into place. Like you're saying, I mean, China's starting to get back to normal. I think Italy's still terrible, but it's slowing down. I mean, at some point it's going to start to come back. And I think, hopefully it's going to be quicker than we all expect. But, is there anything that people should be doing to prepare for Q3, Q4?
Yeah, I think, and some of this is a summary of what I've said, but some not. So I definitely think brands right now should be taking a look at stock positions, their own and through their channel partners, and where there are obvious problems. I think they should face up to them, and I think they should address them immediately, because that could just get more painful as time goes by, right? So I think that's a high priority, and facing up to that, managing it will help their cash flow and give them a great chance of riding of getting through the storm. And then, coming back to that meal that every brand needs to cook, just drilling into all of those ingredients and making sure that everything is in place. I mean, you can't go from being a startup or scale up brand to being a world-class brand in no time. That takes some money, it takes some patience, it takes some time, it takes a lot of experience. And I think it's a great opportunity now to be doing a bit of housekeeping, making sure that, you've got all of your ducks in a row and that you're building your brand on a world-class foundation that will give you a great position for Q3, Q4, and then moving into next year as well. So I think there's a lot that can be done. There's, in this business, building a successful brand is hard work. It's very easy to make a mistake, and those mistakes can end up being very costly. So I think, going through that in detail now, while there might be some other pressures off, is probably a good discipline in order to prepare you for the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with our own business at Ranieri. We've managed to, switch from being office-based to being remote very easily. But the one thing that we found a struggle, quite honestly, is that obviously when we're at work, we talk to each other in the office, and we go to a meeting room, or we go to, a kind of communal area where we can just chat and have a meeting. But now everybody's on conference calls all the time. So it's kind of quite hard to actually get time with someone because they're always on conference calls. And it's also overloading our conference call system. I mean, we all use Zoom here. We've had one for however many years now. Suddenly, I think we need about 50 accounts so that everyone can have a conference call. So,
was Zoom paying you to name drop?
Well, they should be. I might hashtag them after this.
Absolutely worth doing. No, on my side, I mean, we've been doing a ton of traveling, and we're pausing the travel, of course. We're doing far more video calls. I'm finding it much more efficient, to be honest with you. There's no wasted time during your day, and there's still plenty of people that are ready and willing to talk to you, because, like I said earlier, while it's tough right now, it won't be tough forever. So planning for the future remains very important.
Yeah, and it's also, I think you and I are both very we like to do business the kind of face-to-face way and kind of network with people. And I found that, suddenly all these people that haven't spoken to for years, I'm having conference calls with them, all the time. And I think that everyone's in the same position. They're at home, already after, 3 days or 4 days, everyone's dying to get back to work, and they're starting to go through their Rolodeck and just, I'll have a quick chat with such and such. What's he up to? I'll have a chat with this guy. It's kind of, if anything, I think, if you, as long as you're dedicated and you get on with work and adapt to home working, you can come out of this really strong. So just last question, really. So moving forward, I mean, are there any triggers for you to think, well, actually, we're on an upturn again? I mean, because I know, there may be a position where, we come out of the sort of social isolation bit as a country, but I've been reading some reports where apparently they may stagger it, and you come out of social isolation, but they're just more sort of controlling, the flow of patients into the NHS. So you come out, you go back in, you come out, and there's different theories around this. But will there be any sort of indicators for you to sort of say, right, we're out of this now, business is back to normal in terms of consumer electronics and sales, or do you think that's going to be yeah?
Well, I mean, I'd be the first to say that this probably is not my area of expertise. However, that said, from everything I'm seeing and reading, a vaccine would be a great start, because I think that would give a lot of confidence, right? That's the obvious one. I think that they're very close now to tests that will let people know whether they've had it, and obviously had milder symptoms and recovered from it without even knowing that. And I don't know about you, but if I knew that I had had it and therefore was far less likely to get it again, I would be a more confident person. I'd probably be going out more. I'd probably return to a degree of normality. So I think, if either of those two things can happen, then I think we're going to see that V shape that I mentioned earlier on. So I think that would be two key things. I think retailers opening their doors again is obviously another indicator. People going back to work. I don't know how long that's gonna. Hey, Gabriel. I don't know.
We'll meet the world.
Can you print out what I sent you?
Yes, later. Thanks.
The joys of home working. That's real life stuff there.
Okay, 5 minutes. Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
I was just saying, people going back to work and all those sorts of things. The market's starting to recover. Obviously, there's financial stimuluses that have been announced. I think there's a few factors that would have a big impact, and I just think being prepared for that moment when the lights get switched back on is critical, and whoever is there at that moment with relevant product and service offerings will win.
Yeah, cool. Well, look, I really appreciate your time. I know you're really busy, especially everyone's really busy at the moment with what's going on. But thank you for your time, and I look forward to shaking your hand again one day.
Drinking a beer together. It's always good to chat with you. Thanks for having me and letting me be on your podcast, Pietro. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much.
Cheers.